What's up, guys? Jesse DeRozier here with Hydrilla Gorilla Guide Service on Lake Guntersville. This week is week 3 of my new series entitled What's on the Deck. So we're going to discuss again what lures we use this week during our guide trips, as well as any changes that we had kind of take place. They were minor tweaks this week, nothing drastic, so you're going to see a lot of the same lures or style of lures. The only difference might be maybe depth, color adjustments, things like that, just based due to the weather that we had this week. This week we had quite a bit of windy conditions and kind of cloudy, overcast days, and as a result, basically, we ended up having to change up minor things on our lures that we were using. Same as last week. First and foremost was the A-rig. First thing in the morning, those shad are in the ditches adjacent to these shallow flats, and during the night the shad move out there, and first thing in the morning when you get out there, you can get out there with an A-rig in that 12 to 17 foot of water and find those fish out there roaming around, eating and gorging on those bait balls while they're balled up out there. To follow up with that would be the deep running jerk bait. Last week I showed the Mega Bass 110 or Vision 110 plus 1, as well as the Stunna 112 plus 1. Those two, you can dive them down and get below the schools of bait and be able to get to those same fish that you can get to with the A-rig. Sometimes the jerk bait tends to be, to me, a little bit more productive than the A-rig in certain scenarios. It's that cat and mouse type reaction that you get from the fish. If they're not just readily gorging, they may shy away from that A-rig, and if they do, I'll follow it up with the jerk bait. If they're up shallower this week, I put this one down, which I was throwing last week, that Smithwick Rattling Rogue. The reason why is there's no rattles, there's no weight. Basically, that's hard to throw in the wind, and we had some fairly windy conditions this week, and that SPRO McStick has not only rattles in it, but added weight. So the profile's still fairly small. It's like about a 1/4 inch difference from the Smithwick that I was throwing. So it's not much difference in the size profile. But again, you've got 3 hooks instead of 2. So better chance of getting hooked up and keeping those fish pinned and getting them back to the boat. But that's a really good jerk bait. If you've never tried one, that SPRO McStick definitely is a good jerk bait to have tied on. The Topwater bite has still been really good. Even in the windy conditions, it slowed down a little bit, but they were still eating it. So I'd been throwing this old Cordell, old school bait, cotton Cordell, but it's like a 1-knocker. It's got 1 hard BB in it. So I'd been throwing 1-knockers primarily. The other one that I was throwing was the Teckle knocker, which is basically a Vixen. It's got 1 knocker in it. So you can hear the sound difference, and that's the key. So there's days when they key on sound more than necessarily the profile. So this one being louder tends to draw a lot harder strikes sometimes, a little bit more vicious strikes. This one, they'll just swim up and the bait will just get flushed. It's just gone. But with that 1-knocker, I have noticed that sometimes I'll pull up to a school and be working that school, and all of a sudden it's like they won't touch it no more. So what I did this week is changed up again the sound. So again, similar profile, same size, about the same look, but this one has a bunch of BBs in it. So again, changing the sound. You can go right back to the same school and go through 3 different topwaters and be able to continue to get bit just by changing your sound. So I would say right now, sound over color is probably the bigger issue with being able to get them to come back up on your topwater lure. The same with a lipless. So this week, because of the windy conditions, we had a lot less shad activity up on the surface. Those fish were staying down. So I went back to the 3/4 ounce. This is the SPRO Uruku shad. This thing dives really good in that 6 to 9 foot of water. It'll get down and tick the tops of that grass. But again, I've got multiple colors that I was running, you know, shad patterns, but also going back to craw patterns. So changing color is great, but also changing the sound. So this one has a lot of BBs. Changing up and going to a 1-knocker, if they're getting lure shy again, change the sound. You can try changing the color. Sometimes that'll still work, but it seems like that sound, they get used to that, the sound of the lure coming through their area. They're not all seeing it, but they're hearing it. All of them are hearing it. So that sound travels, you know, 10 times better in water than it does on land. So they're hearing that lure every time it comes, every cast that you're making. Change up your sound. That can get you more bites by just making that one change. Going to the really shallow water, I've been going with weedless baits. That said, this is the Producer Swimbaits. This is a 3.5, I think it's called Swiminator, blue minnow. And this specific bait actually is been probably my top producer for overall bites. The Flashy Swimmer from Owner is a 1/4 ounce, a 5/0 hook with a silver willow leaf. And if you can't find it, you can get a conversion kit. If you're able to get your hands on one that has a Colorado blade, they do sell conversion kits to be able to change them over to the willow leaf blades. The other one that I've been throwing, again, shad profile in the shallows, just been a chatterbait. Here, changing up the color has made the difference. Not necessarily of the body, still running shad profiles, so I'm not too worried about, you know, the color specifics of the bait, but more so the blade. A painted blade versus a silver blade. In sunny conditions, it seems like I've been getting more bites on the silver blade. On cloudy conditions, I've been getting more bites on the painted blade. So in that one, because it is a silent bait for the most part, your color changes seem to be a bigger difference than with the hard baits. Up in those really shallow waters where I'm throwing that swim bait is also running a swim jig. That swim jig, you can throw it in that thick grass where you can't run that chatterbait, because that chatterbait will foul in around the blade sometimes with that grass. And if you're in grass that keeps doing that, pick up the swim jig. You can throw it through those same areas and it's going to have the same presentation and profile. You're just not going to have the vibration. And the fish right now, they're so keyed on that small bait. The small bait's not really throwing off that much vibration. If you watch them in the water, a lot of them are swimming very, very slowly. They're not zipping around. They're just up there kind of lazily moving. And so that swimming through there will still get eaten. It does not matter that you don't have a blade on it. The little bit sunnier days when you've got less wind, I am picking up a soft plastic and going through these same areas. Those fish aren't leaving those locations, so again, just going back with a light Texas rig. Depending on where you're at will dictate color. Right now, still out on the main river, we're still seeing those stained waters from that hurricane rains that were up north. We're still seeing that silty condition out on the main. So there, I'm going to throw those darker colors. If I'm up in the creeks where the water's cleaner or clearer, I'm going to probably throw something more natural, green pumpkin, watermelon seed, something of that nature basically, and work around those same areas where I had been throwing these other baits, but with the lack of the shad presence and the shad kind of getting them active. Those bright bluebird days, the soft plastic's probably a good way to, continue to get bites. If you are a tournament angler and you're looking for not just numbers, but you're looking for that larger class fish. The guys are still catching them out there scoping. They're catching some big fish out there. So that is a very good way to go. It's not something that, I can really do a lot of with two guys in the boat. One guy that's sitting in the back is going to be SOL if we tried to do that. So I don't tend to run very many trips trying to do that unless it's just a single person. So in that regard, if you're not scoping and you're looking for tournament quality fish, frogging right now is a good way to go. The mats this week have probably reduced by half. A lot of them are sinking. They're actually falling to the bottom of the lake. And what that does is it congregates those fish that want to be underneath those mats to the remaining mats that are there. So you're getting a concentration of fish that are there. And basically what I'm doing is, now that the mats are thin, the fish are able to physically see what your frog looks like, instead of them just feeling it and kind of blowing up because they feel the movement of that frog being there. So depending on the conditions, if you've got cloudy days or sunny days, throwing one that's more just a dark color or something that's bright that they're visually gonna, key on can make a difference. This one's gonna silhouette really well. This one's gonna be visual for them. So take a SPRO frog and throw it in there, and if you're not getting bit, change your color. Go back. If you're already throwing dark, go with something bright. If you're throwing something bright, go with something dark. See if that makes a difference in actually getting them to come up and blow up on that frog. If you're not getting blow-ups, those fish are there. There's not a question of whether or not they're there. If they're not willing to come up on a frog, you need to be picking up a punch bait. Those same areas, those fish are in there. Go with any style beaver bait. Right now, this is 1.25 ounces. It's what I had been using. But now that the mats are thinning out, this will be getting changed. I'll be probably downstepping this to a 1 ounce or even a 3/4. And I would say even have multiple rods on your deck if you are punching, just like a frog. Having a couple of options there, so that if you hit a thick mat, you can pick up the 1.25 ounces. If you get into one that's a little bit thinner, you can hit the 1 ounce. If you get into really thin, going in and dropping that big weight is almost a little bit too obnoxious and can spook the fish. Whereas if you were to throw the 3/4 and just let it quietly slip through there and all of a sudden it's in their face, you'll still get those bites. So keep that readily available on the deck. Keep those options there, because trying to cut off a snell knot and have to retie every time you change locations or to a different mat, it's really frustrating. So if you have the rods to be able to do it, definitely tie up multiple options. If you don't, I'd say go with a 1 ounce right now. You can probably shake it through where the 1.25 ounces is going through relatively smooth, and it's not so heavy that it's to the point that it's going to overly spook a lot of fish. But to be able to drop that in there quietly and smoothly, it definitely will make a big difference in your overall bites. When these fish bite and you have too big of a weight, a lot of times it'll blow their mouth open. So keeping that weight as small as you possibly can to get through the mat can make a difference on when you actually set the hook, that you actually do get a good hookup with that fish, versus it knocking their mouth open and you either skin hook it and it pulls off, or just altogether just swinging and missing. As far as weather conditions for this coming week, I looked at the weather and it doesn't look like we're going to see drastic changes. We are getting some more cooler temperatures on the nights. It's like 45 to 50 for the lows, and then like 62 to 67 for the highs during the day. So again, that water is going to continue to creep down. It's not going to be some drastic, big drop in the course of a week. So these fish will continue to feel that water temperature drop. They're going to continue to feed. The lures that we just discussed will continue to produce going forward in the next week. Again, tweaks is the name of the game right now. Not necessarily big changes, just tweaking the bait, whether it's your color, your sound, vibration, flash. Those things are what you're looking at, not necessarily just overall drastic, oh, I'm going to abandon what I've been doing and I'm going to completely, rewrite the book. So you've got the bulk of the lures of what we've been doing. All it is taking what you have, whether you have similar lures or the exact lures, find something that's close and use those tweaks. Change those sounds, change the flash, change the vibration if need be. Those are the things that you're looking to do, not necessarily changing everything as far as the overall setups that you'll have on the deck of the boat. As we get into the cold temperatures, that's when we're going to see major changes. You'll go to a lot more of those wintertime style baits instead of these faster moving baits. Because right now, when I'm working that jerk bait, I'm not doing a slow pause. I mean, I'm getting after it. It's a pretty fast retrieve, and the pauses are momentary. They're not very long at all. So until then, guys, I'll see you next week. And if I run into you out on the water, don't be afraid to say hey. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know if any of this information has helped. Until then, guys, have a great week and tight lines.